$500. That's the astronomical fine Harper Quinn, the HOA president, wanted me to pay for keeping my chickens. When she knocked on my door, her eyes bulged like she'd just caught her husband cheating. I knew right then and there. Either my chickens would disappear or I had to become a tactical genius. 3 months later, not only are all 37 of my chickens still happily clucking in the yard, but Harper is the one who had to sell her house and flee the neighborhood. And the best part? She's currently under criminal investigation by the Securities Commission. Never mess with a man and his chickens. If you've ever been harassed by an HOA, comment below with HOA nightmare. I want to know I'm not fighting this battle alone. And where are you watching from? Has your HOA ever tried to pull something similar? From Silicon Valley exec to chicken farmer, I never expected to become a chicken guy. 5 years ago, I was grinding away in Silicon Valley, running a tech startup specializing in farm management software. The irony was not lost on me. I was creating digital solutions for farmers but barely saw the sun. After selling the company for what my parents called stupid money, I decided to reset my life at 45. No more 16-hour workdays, no more fluorescent office lighting, and definitely no more takeout containers piling up in the trash. I found the perfect property in Prairie Creek Estates, a semi-rural subdivision in Texas with 2 acres backing up to undeveloped countryside. A beautiful craftsman-style home, big enough for my office and whatever hobbies I'd discover in retirement. The HOA seemed reasonable, mainly focused on keeping the neighborhood tidy, not controlling every detail of homeowners' lives. At least that's what I thought. How it all began, the chicken journey. My chicken adventure started accidentally. During my first spring in the new house, I stopped by a local farm supply store and was charmed by a display of fluffy baby chicks. Before I knew it, I had 5 at home, along with a beginner's guide to chicken keeping. What began as a whim quickly became a passion. 2 years later, my flock had grown to 37 birds, each with their own personality. There was Beyoncé, my assertive lead hen in Einstein, the surprisingly clever rooster who ruled the yard. I built them what neighbors jokingly called the chicken mansion, a meticulously designed multi-structure setup that was both functional and attractive. Neighbors were generally supportive. Emily Watson, the elementary school teacher next door, often visited, bought eggs, and even brought her students over for educational visits. Jacob Turner, a 72-year-old retired military officer across the street, shared gardening tips and farm stories, becoming a mentor of sorts. Even those who didn't get involved appreciated the fresh eggs I regularly shared around the neighborhood. The hidden HOA fine print. What I didn't realize was that my chicken paradise operated in a gray area. The HOA covenant had vague language. It limited pets to 3 per household but didn't specifically mention birds or chickens. Since nobody complained and my coop was immaculate, it hadn't been an issue. Then everything changed. The beginning of the war. The morning after a local newspaper ran a feature on me titled, "From Silicon Valley to Chicken Whisperer, Zachary Armstrong's New Life," I was in the backyard feeding my flock when the gate creaked open. Harper Quinn, the new HOA president, marched up with a clipboard and a scowl that could curdle milk. "Mr. Armstrong, I'm Harper Quinn. We need to talk about your farm operation," she said, like I was running an illegal meth lab instead of raising chickens. She surveyed my setup with disdain, tapping a manicured finger on the HOA regulations. Section 8, paragraph 3 clearly states, residents are limited to 3 pets per household. No livestock or free-ranging animals are permitted within Prairie Creek Estates. I was confused. I'd lived there 2 years with no problems. No noise issues, I said. Several neighbors benefit from the eggs. She was unmoved. Rules are rules, Mr. Armstrong. Whether someone complained or not is irrelevant. Then she handed me a violation notice. I had 30 days to reduce my chickens to 3 or face a $100 daily fine per excess bird. The math hit me like a punch. 34 birds over the limit at $100 each. $3,400 per day, over $100,000 a month. Rallying. The neighborhood once Harper left, I called Emily and Jacob. They were shocked and angry. "This is ridiculous," Emily said. "Your chickens are better cared for than most dogs and cats around here." Jacob nodded. "Back in my day, we'd talk things out over dinner. But Miss Quinn, she's not the dinner type." I spent the day poring over HOA documents, looking for loopholes. The rules were frustratingly vague on poultry. I requested a formal HOA meeting, hoping reason might prevail. The HOA office told me Harper had already put my case on the agenda. "Between you and me," Richard Barnes, the vice president, confided, "Harper's been looking to make examples of rule breakers since she was elected. She's controlling and vindictive." Not encouraging, but it confirmed this was about power, not the chickens. Legal help and a clever plan Emily brought good news. Her cousin James Parker, a property law attorney who specializes in fighting unreasonable HOAs, was willing to help. James was excited. He called people like Harper suburban tyrants. For the first time, I had hope. At the HOA meeting, with James, Emily, and Jacob by my side, I prepared to fight. The community center was packed. Word had spread. Harper began with her usual sharp tone, accusing me of running a chicken farm that threatened neighborhood values. She warned, "If we allow this, what's next? Goats? Pigs? Cattle?" Several neighbors chuckled at the slippery slope argument. When my turn came, I spoke calmly. "I've lived here 2 years, making every effort to be a good neighbor. My coop is clean, odorless, and quiet. Many neighbors buy my eggs, even some board members." Mrs. Jenkins, an 80-year-old neighbor, stood to say, "Those chickens give me a reason to walk every day. The fresh eggs are great for my health." Jacob vouched for my property maintenance. The mood shifted. When James spoke about the legal limits of HOA power and vague covenants, eyes focused. "Certainly. Here are several examples of local municipalities in the United States that have revised their ordinances to explicitly permit backyard chickens, reflecting their growing popularity. Austin, Texas. Austin revised its city ordinances to allow residents to keep up to 6 hens on their property, provided certain conditions regarding co-op location, cleanliness, and noise control are met. This change was part of a broader urban agriculture initiative encouraging sustainable food production. Portland, Oregon. Portland permits residents to keep up to 3 hens without a permit and more with approval. Their regulations include standards for coop size, setbacks from property lines, and rules prohibiting roosters to limit noise. Seattle, Washington. Seattle amended its municipal code to allow chickens in residential zones, typically limiting flock size to 4 hens and requiring co-op registration and compliance with animal welfare standards. Madison, Wisconsin. Madison allows residents to keep up to 4 hens in most residential neighborhoods. The city established guidelines on coop placement, maintenance, and sanitation to minimize nuisances and health concerns. Boulder, Colorado. Boulder passed ordinances permitting backyard chickens in residential areas with specific limits on flock size and detailed co-op requirements designed to balance residents' interests and neighborhood harmony. These examples illustrate a growing trend among municipalities recognizing backyard chickens as part of urban and suburban lifestyles, often tied to interests in sustainability, local food sourcing, and even mental well-being. Mark's inspection concluded swiftly and professionally. "This chicken husbandry operation exceeds all county health and safety standards," he announced, handing me the official certificate of compliance. Meanwhile, Harper stood nearby, visibly fuming. "The health concerns may be addressed," she said stiffly, "but this doesn't change the fact that Mr. Armstrong's operation violates our HOA covenants." After Harper left, I cautiously asked Mark if he knew her. "Not directly," he replied after a pause, "but my wife Lisa went to college with a Harper Quinn." Small world, if it's the same person. Something in his tone hinted at more, but he held his professional boundaries firmly. Later that evening, Emily came by to hear about the inspection. When I mentioned the phone call I overheard, she grew thoughtful. "You know, I've always wondered about Harper. She drives a brand new Mercedes, always wears designer clothes, and now I hear her talking about investment portfolios." Curious, Emily did some online digging and made a surprising discovery. Harper had been presenting herself on social media as a wealth mindset coach and investment advisor for women navigating divorce and life transitions, without any obvious certifications or licenses. The next morning, James joined us to discuss the findings. The HOA covenant has strict rules about home-based businesses, he noted after reviewing the documents. If Harper is running unauthorized financial advisory services from her home, she's violating the very rules she's trying to enforce against you. Further research through James's industry contacts revealed no record of Harper being registered with the Texas State Securities Board or any other regulatory body, a potentially serious violation if she was indeed giving investment advice or managing money. We agreed to keep this information in reserve for now. Let's see how Harper responds to the health inspection results first, James advised. It was a strategic move. Offer Harper a chance to de-escalate before unleashing our heaviest countermeasures. 2 days later, I received another certified letter, this time from Harper's attorney. Despite the perfect health inspection, they insisted the emotional support animal claim was frivolous and abusive, and demanded I remove all but 3 chickens within 14 days. The letter threatened fines and legal action for intentional violation of community standards. Reading the increasingly aggressive language, I sighed. She really doesn't know she's poking a beehive, I muttered, reaching for my phone. The time for restraint was over. It was time for a comprehensive counteroffensive against Harper's campaign of intimidation. The next phase required careful coordination. James and I spent hours preparing a robust legal response, while Emily mobilized community support. We decided on a 3-pronged approach: strengthen our legal position on the emotional support animal claim, gather evidence of Harper's unauthorized business activities, build public awareness about the therapeutic benefits of the chicken program. James filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, alleging Harper's violation of the very covenants she sought to enforce, complete with screenshots from her social media advertising financial advisory services, including client testimonials about in-home consultations. We're not trying to get her in regulatory trouble yet, James explained. This is just to show she's not applying the rules fairly or consistently. Simultaneously, we submitted a comprehensive accommodation request under the Fair Housing Act. The request included David's professional certification documentation, testimonials from community members who benefited from the chicken therapy sessions, and a formal legal notice warning the HOA that failure to provide reasonable accommodation could result in a federal housing discrimination complaint, a serious threat for any HOA. Emily, leveraging her community connections, organized a therapy chicken open house. We invited neighbors, local media, and county officials to witness the operation firsthand. Sarah Johnson, an ally from the local paper, eagerly covered the event, especially after I shared the emerging story of HOA overreach and the innovative, therapeutic program we had developed. The open house was scheduled for Saturday. By Thursday, Harper caught wind of it and immediately issued a cease and desist letter, claiming the event violated HOA rules against commercial activities and public gatherings. James responded swiftly, pointing out that educational and therapeutic activities among neighbors were explicitly permitted under the covenant's community enrichment provisions. He also noted that if Harper tried to block the event, we would publicly question why she was allowed to host business clients at home. While others could not hold educational gatherings, Harper backed down but didn't relent. Through Richard Barnes, we learned she was pursuing a new tactic, attempting to have me expelled from the neighborhood entirely via a rarely used community disruption clause requiring a supermajority vote of the board and residents. Apparently, Harper was lobbying aggressively, claiming I was deliberately undermining community standards and harmony. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, sunshine, a light breeze, and mild temperatures. I set up the backyard with information stations about chicken care and therapy, comfortable seating where visitors could interact with the friendlier birds, and a refreshment table featuring foods made from eggs laid by my flock. Emily prepared educational materials about animal-assisted therapy, and David was on hand to answer questions about its therapeutic applications. The turnout exceeded all expectations. Over 60 neighbors, several reporters, and local officials attended during the 4-hour event. Tom Roberts from the regional news station did a live broadcast from my backyard, interviewing visitors about their experiences with the chicken therapy program. The highlight was 8-year-old Max, a child with autism who regularly participated in weekly sessions. Calm and focused, he confidently explained on camera how holding and feeding the chickens helped him manage his anxiety. Most surprising of all was Barbara Thompson, a senior HOA board member and former Harper supporter. She arrived mid-event looking hesitant but curious. I welcomed her warmly and invited her to join a therapy session David was conducting. Initially reluctant, she eventually sat in a chair in the chicken yard, visibly tense as hens approached her. But within 15 minutes she was smiling, gently stroking Beyoncé. A contented hen settled on her lap. "I had no idea," Barbara admitted later. "Harper described this as a dirty, noisy operation, but it's beautiful, peaceful even. Seeing how the children responded made me think differently. I've been on anxiety medication since my husband passed away last year," she added, softly. "I wonder if something like this might help me too." I assured her she was welcome anytime and thanked her for her open mind. The event garnered extensive positive media coverage, highlighting the therapeutic program's innovation and community benefits. Several stories framed the HOA dispute as a conflict between arbitrary rule enforcement and meaningful community wellness initiatives, painting Harper as obstructionist and out of touch. As the last visitors departed, I received an urgent call from Richard Barnes. "Harper's losing it," he whispered. The positive media coverage has her panicking, especially after Barbara's glowing endorsement. "She's calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow night to vote on your expulsion under the Community Disruption Clause. She's pulling out." All the stops even brought in Deputy Mayor Bethany Ross, an old friend of hers from college. This was an unexpected escalation. Deputy Mayor Ross wielded significant influence over zoning and property matters, and if she supported Harper's claim that my chicken operation violated municipal regulations, it could spell trouble beyond the HOA's reach. "Harper thinks this is her nuclear option," Richard added. "With Bethany's support, she believes she can force the board's hand regardless of community sentiment." I immediately called James to report the new development. Far from concerned, he sounded almost pleased. "Perfect timing," he said cryptically. "I was just about to call you. I've heard back from my contact at the Texas State Securities Board. They're very interested in the info we provided about Harper's unauthorized financial advisory activities. They've assigned an investigator." After a pause, James continued, "Let Harper proceed with her emergency meeting. I think it's time we prepare our own countermeasures for maximum impact. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? We need to plan carefully for tomorrow night." As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The stakes had escalated dramatically, but somehow, I sensed Harper's aggressive escalation was about to backfire spectacularly. Jennifer Adams followed with a clinical legal assessment of my alleged violations, dismissing the emotional support animal classification as little more than a creative legal maneuver lacking substantive merit. She cited case law that, in her view, invalidated group animal therapy designations, and she argued that my operation was essentially commercial in nature, given its scale and the public events I had hosted. Her arguments were technically sophisticated, though somewhat misleading through selective interpretation of precedents. Next came Bethany Ross's presentation. As Deputy Mayor and Urban Planning Commissioner, her opinion carried significant weight. While she made clear she was not speaking in an official capacity, her presence alone suggested otherwise. Bethany noted that Mr. Armstrong's property use appeared inconsistent with residential zoning designations. She said, "Therapy, program or not, the presence of chickens exceeds what would reasonably be considered incidental agricultural use in a residential setting." Her implicit threat of municipal intervention cast a heavy shadow. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium calmly. I thanked the board and attendees for the opportunity to address the allegations directly. I shared my personal journey, from a high-stress tech executive to a chicken keeper, explaining how caring for the flock helped me manage anxiety and find purpose after retirement. I told stories of community members who had benefited from the therapy program, from children with developmental challenges to elderly neighbors struggling with isolation. James then followed with a measured legal rebuttal. He methodically addressed each point raised by Jennifer Adams, presenting official documentation of our Fair Housing Act accommodation request and emphasizing David's professional certification of the therapy program. He cited several recent cases where courts upheld unconventional support animals, arguing that the law evolves alongside our understanding of therapy. He noted that group animal therapy is an emerging field supported by promising research. David provided professional context, explaining the therapeutic framework we developed and the documented benefits observed in participants. His credentials as a licensed psychologist lent credibility, and his position on the HOA board made his endorsement especially powerful. He concluded, "I believe we should be supporting innovative wellness initiatives rather than obstructing them." The discussion, open to community input. Numerous residents spoke in favor of the chicken therapy program. Parents described remarkable improvements in their children's emotional regulation and social skills. Elderly neighbors spoke about how visiting the chickens had become a weekly highlight. Even a local real estate agent argued that unique amenities, like a therapy chicken program, could enhance property values by distinguishing the neighborhood. The momentum was clearly shifting against Harper. Her body language betrayed growing agitation. When Barbara Thompson, previously one of Harper's supporters, rose to share her positive experience at the open house and announce her changed position, Harper's composure finally cracked. "This is absurd," Harper snapped. "We're talking about chickens, not service dogs. Barbara, I expected better from you than to be taken in by this petting zoo publicity stunt," Harper added, her tone harsh. Barbara looked shocked. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the crowd. Harper tried to regain control of the meeting, but the damage was done. Her dismissive attitude toward a respected senior board member alienated many who had been on the fence. Sensing the shifting mood, Harper hastily called for a vote on my expulsion before more support could erode. This was the moment James and I had been waiting for. As Harper began the voting procedure, I stood and spoke calmly. "Before we proceed with this vote, I believe there's another matter of covenant compliance that should be addressed." The room quieted as I continued. Specifically, Section 12 of our HOA covenant prohibits operating businesses from residential properties without proper registration and approval. I have recently become aware of a serious violation of this provision that the board should consider. Harper's face tightened as she realized where this was heading. "This is not relevant to the current proceedings," she interjected hastily. "We're here to address Mr. Armstrong's violations, not entertain diversionary tactics." James stepped forward, distributing a folder of documents to board members. "On the contrary," he said smoothly, "equal enforcement of covenant provisions is absolutely relevant to any discussion of compliance and sanctions." The documents detailed Harper's unauthorized financial advisory business, including social media advertisements, client testimonials mentioning in-home consultations, and a comprehensive breakdown of SEC and state registration requirements she appeared to have violated. As board members leafed through the material, expressions of surprise and concern spread across their faces. "Miss Quinn has been operating an unlicensed financial advisory business from her home," James explained to the stunned audience. "She's been providing investment advice and managing client funds without proper registration or licensing. This represents not only a clear violation of HOA regulations regarding home businesses, but potentially serious regulatory infractions." At that moment, a distinguished-looking man in the back stood up. "Kevin Matthews, Texas State Securities Board," he introduced himself. "I'm here as an observer following up on information about potentially unlicensed investment advisory activities. I'd be interested in speaking with Miss Quinn after this meeting." The bombshell revelation sent shockwaves through the room. All eyes turned to Harper, whose face had drained of color. Bethany Ross, clearly alarmed, began distancing herself both literally and figuratively from Harper. "I was invited here solely to comment on zoning compatibility issues," she stated firmly. "I have no knowledge of or connection to any financial advisory activities Ms. Quinn may have been conducting." Her previous confidence evaporated replaced by obvious concern over reputational damage. Richard Barnes seized the moment to take control. In light of these serious allegations, he said, I move that we table the vote regarding Mr. Armstrong and instead address the apparent violations by our board president. I further move that we vote immediately on whether Ms. Quinn should recuse herself from leadership duties pending investigation. Several board members quickly seconded the motion. The vote that followed was decisive. With only Jennifer Adams abstaining, the board unanimously approved Harper's temporary removal from leadership and the formation of an investigative committee to examine both situations. Richard was appointed interim president and immediately proposed a 60-day moratorium on enforcement actions related to my chickens, pending proper accommodation procedures under the Fair Housing Act. As the meeting adjourned, Harper was surrounded by concerned residents asking pointed questions about their investments. Bethany Ross made a hasty exit, avoiding reporters who had caught wind of the dramatic developments. Kevin Matthews discreetly approached Harper with his business card. Their brief conversation ended with her looking visibly shaken. James, Emily, David, and I gathered outside the community center, processing the extraordinary turn of events that had gone even better than we anticipated. James admitted, the securities board investigators showing up in person was unexpected. They must consider this a priority case. Emily, practically bouncing with excitement, said, Did you see Harper's face when Kevin introduced himself? I thought she might faint right there. David, ever the measured professional, offered a more philosophical perspective. Sometimes, people most rigid about rules for others are hiding their own violations, he observed. Harper's need to control others may stem from fear of her own precarious situation being discovered. I nodded, feeling not so much triumph as relief that the threat to my chickens had been neutralized and justice had prevailed in an unexpected way. As we walked to our cars, I reflected on the past few months, from panic at potentially losing my beloved flock to developing a legitimate therapy program, helping community members and challenging conventional notions of emotional support animals. What had begun as Harper's personal vendetta ultimately strengthened both my position in the community and the therapeutic value of my chicken operation. Sometimes, I mused, adversity truly does lead to unexpected growth and opportunity. The year following Harper's dramatic downfall brought remarkable transformation to Prairie Creek Estates. Under Richard Barnes's leadership as HOA president, the community overhauled outdated regulations to explicitly permit small-scale animal keeping with reasonable guidelines instead of arbitrary restrictions. My chicken therapy program received official recognition in the revised rules and became a model that several neighboring communities adopted in their covenant revisions. With David's professional guidance, I expanded Prairie Creek Healing Wings into a formal therapeutic program, building specialized facilities for various therapeutic activities. Local healthcare providers began referring patients to us, and a university research team documented significant benefits for participants with anxiety, depression, and developmental challenges. Emily and I grew closer throughout the process, our partnership blossoming into romance as we combined her educational expertise with my organizational skills to help others. Harper's legal troubles proved substantial. The Securities Board investigation revealed she had operated an unregistered investment advisory business for nearly 2 years and improperly managed client funds. She sold her house at a loss within months of the meeting and reportedly relocated out of state, though her legal problems followed her there. The last we heard, she settled with state regulators, paying substantial penalties and accepting a 5-year ban from financial advisory activities. On the anniversary of Harper's first visit to my property, we held a community celebration at the therapy center. Richard presented me with a wooden plaque carved with a chicken and the inscription, "For extraordinary contributions to community wellness and challenging us to think beyond conventional boundaries." As the sun set over my expanded chicken yard, with Beyoncé and Einstein proudly supervising their growing flock, I reflected on how a simple act of defiance against unreasonable authority had evolved into something benefiting an entire community. Sometimes, I told Emily as we watched the chickens settle for the night, to protect what you love, you need to be a little chicken. And me? I have an entire army of chickens ready to battle. The soft clucking of contented birds provided the perfect soundtrack to our laughter, as darkness fell on Prairie Creek Estates. A community forever changed by an unlikely flock of feathered therapists and the man who fought for their right to exist.